Since the dawn of the 21st century, scientific discovery has rushed forward at lightning speed. Genetics, physics, computerized technology, robotics, virtual reality. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert as they uncover the truths behind this ultimate scientific deception. Welcome to SciFriday.
Megaliths and monuments. We explore them with science. Welcome to SciFriday. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert. Welcome to our family room once more. We are going to be exploring some wonderful things in Israel today.
Yes, this is really an amazing thing. The more archaeologists discover in the Holy Land, the more it supports the narrative of the Bible. The history is confirmed by what the archaeologists are digging out of the ground.
It is, and our good friend Aaron Lipkin has been posting about this for the last few months on Facebook. A very exciting discovery that you and I have talked about before on this very program, the lead tablet. Which was discovered at Joshua's altar.
But the archaeologist involved in that dig, Dr. Scott Stripling, also has another site where he's been very active, and this is actually creating some complications because the lead curse tablet at Joshua's altar was so spectacular that if they found what he thinks they found at Shiloh, it will just make the skeptics roll their eyes and say, oh, sure, another one by this same guy. Right, yeah,
But he is a legitimate archaeologist.
Yep.
He's a methodical, a meticulous scientist who not only makes sure that the stratigraphy is correct, he documents everything as he finds it, and he makes sure that he's got a lot of professional opinions to back up the chemistry and the geology and everything that goes along with these discoveries.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that after the break. We're talking about a dig in Israel at the site where the Tabernacle stood for more than 3 centuries, so stick around after the break for that.
You and I have been there.
Oh, yes.
We've been there twice, and it is an extraordinary place. If you go to Israel with us in March of 2023, you will go there and you'll stand there and you will have an experience that is, well, frankly, the last time we were there with Zev Porat, and he had just given a talk about Hannah and Hannah's prayer. Do you remember that?
I do. And it was just stunning to realize, as English speakers, we don't get the full meaning out of the Hebrew text oftentimes.
Well, and there's a large tablet, a big sign that has the Hebrew and I think English, but he was looking at the Hebrew and he said, do you know what this says?
Now, you look over here, it says, I rejoiced in Yeshua. It's the word Yeshua. I rejoice in Yeshua. Look at the end of the Bible verse where it says, to his king and exalt the name of his anointed one. That's in Hebrew, Meshichol, Kevin Meshichol, Messiah.
English speakers aren't aware that, many of us, that the word in Hebrew, Yeshua, means salvation. That when we see that word translated in the Old Testament, we don't connect it to Jesus. But we should.
His name actually means what he did for us.
Right.
But because many Jews are taught that Christians worship Yeshu, not Yeshua.
Yeah, and there's a big difference there because Yeshu is it's an insult. Yeah.
It's an insult. So as here we are on Shiloh, the site of the Tabernacle, and there are a lot of things there archaeologically, geologically that you will find exciting. I know that I was able to get a photograph I nudged our guide and I said, is it just me or is there a horn on that bit of rock? And sure enough, he said, yes, that looks like it may be one of the corners of the altar.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that Dr. Stripling has mentioned, that they have found the 4 corners.
Yes, I don't know if they found 4, but they have found 3. They were looking for the 4th, but that's big to find. I mean, where else would it be?
Yeah.
But that is another sign that that is the site.
So if, in fact, they found the actual location of the tabernacle, that would be huge. And that is what they are investigating and need to do more research on. And, of course, with COVID putting the clamps on everything for a couple of years at least, things are just now getting back up to speed as far as archaeology in Israel, at least in terms of what outside researchers can do.
Yeah.
So, and this is really unique because this is one of the few sites in Israel where the Israel Antiquities Authority is allowing a dig led by an openly evangelical Christian.
I know, isn't that exciting? So we are at the top. Zev Porat has just given this talk to us. It's shown us on the sign in Hebrew that the name of Jesus, Yeshua, was right there in Hannah's prayer. So we're coming back from the site of the altar, the site of the Ark of the Covenant. And as we're walking down the path, what do we see?
It looked like an interesting cloud formation at first until we began to think, now, wait a minute.
It was the only cloud.
Only cloud in the sky, and then someone suggested perhaps a plane formed that, but the pattern that it made is not something that a pilot would be able to execute.
No, not at all. It looked, and I think we have a photograph of it.
Got video.
It looked like a cloud shaped exactly like the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, the typical artist depictions of the wings of the cherubim or cherubim over the Ark of the Covenant, but it is really remarkable that occurred right there over the site of Shiloh, where
right after we'd had this talk, right after we had heard from the guide again how this was probably the site of the tabernacle where the ark rested, and of course where Eli's sons lost the ark.
Well, yeah, they lost it on the battlefield with the Philistines.
Well, exactly, but they took it out.
Right, and should not have done so. But, Eli's sons, as the Bible tells us, were not living for the Lord anyway. They really didn't believe in him. But Hannah's prayer is really remarkable when you understand what is going on in here, where she read, and 1 Samuel chapter 2.
I love Hannah.
Hannah prayed and said, "My heart exalts in the Lord, in Yahweh. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation." And that, of course, is the word there that says, Yeshua, I rejoice in your Yeshua. And Zev uses this as a teaching moment when he's witnessing to Jews.
Yes.
But for Christians, it really is instructive for us to understand that this is what's in the prayer here. And when you read down a little further in verse 4, the bows of the mighty are broken. The bows of the Gibborim are broken.
I know. And referring to bows, we just think, well, that means warfare and their abilities, but it also was used by Resheph.
Yes, one of the chief demonic entities of the Canaanite pantheon.
Well, he wasn't a demon.
Well,
he isn't
fallen
a
angel,
demon.
right.
He's a fallen angel. But
Scholars will call him
names.
demonic, but you're right. He's a fallen angel. He was known as Apollo to the Greeks and Romans, and that was his main weapon. So yes, the bows of the mighty are broken, but that reference there is also a hint at something bigger than the Nephilim or the mighty men who were of old.
Incredible.
Yeah,
prayer.
and then there's even a reference in verse 6. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and raises up.
It's exactly what happened with Jesus.
Yes, exactly. And so while we often are told that there's no picture of resurrection in the Old Testament, I think we see it here. We see it certainly in Job. I know that my Redeemer lives. And
I will see him with my very own eyes.
Right. And in Isaiah chapter 26, where he talks about resurrection, they are dead, they will not live. They are Rephaim, they will not rise. And then we continue in Hannah's prayer in verse 10 of 1 Samuel 2. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his Messiah, his anointed. So it's a wonderful prayer, especially when we understand what the Hebrew actually means. The underlying Hebrew means.
Yes.
And we make that connection in English, then we get a little deeper understanding. So that's why we're so excited about the archaeology that's been done by the Associates for Biblical Research and Scott Stripling at Shiloh.
And it's one reason we're going again to their meeting in the fall.
Yeah, archaeology is very exciting for a lot of reasons. But
Archaeology is cool. If you're watching this and you're a young person, you haven't yet chosen what you want to do in college, study archaeology.
Yeah, yeah. We need more Christian archaeologists working out there in the field. But when we come back from the break, we will bring you an interview that we recorded last year at the International Symposium on Archaeology and the Bible. We had the opportunity to sit down with Dr. Scott Stripling, and he told us about the research and the exciting discoveries at Shiloh. That's straight ahead on SciFriday.
Space is not the final frontier, but there are those who want you to think it is. 75 years ago, something crashed in the desert near Roswell, New Mexico. An industry has grown up to sell the idea that the pilots were extraterrestrials. We want you to know the truth. For a limited time, we're making available a special offer featuring the groundbreaking book, The Day the Earth Stands Still. This book shows step by step how the occult teachings of Madame Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley grew into the ancient aliens hypothesis of the modern UFO movement. It's our Gilbert House Roswell special. For just $35, we'll send you The Day the Earth Stands Still, plus our DVD sets, The Best of SciFriday Volumes 1 and 2. It's a $65 value for just $35. Take advantage of the Gilbert House Roswell special for a limited time only, and you'll only find it at our store, online at gilberthouse.org.
Welcome back to SciFriday. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and as I mentioned before the break, we want to remind you that in March of 2023, we are going back to Israel. And right now in Israel, you don't have to be vaccinated. You don't have to take a test. You don't have to take a test to come back to the United States. So it's flying the old-fashioned way.
Yes, and we're looking forward to getting back there because we've learned a few things about the Bible, about history, about archaeology since we were there last. So we are looking forward to getting back to the sites that we saw in 2018 and 2019, like Shiloh, Bethel. Yes. We have not yet seen the footprint structures like Argamon, but we're looking forward to that as well. And of course, getting back to Gilgal Rephaim, the Wheel of the Giants on the Golan Heights, from which you can see Mount Hermon in the distance. And we'll take a trip over quarter of a mile away to the newly recognized Serpent Mound of Bashan. We've also learned a few things about the importance of that area between the Sea of Galilee and Mount Hermon and why Jesus spent so much of his time there. Why did he call his first disciples from there? Why did he spend his time at Capernaum? The Sea of Galilee, more supernaturally important than we realize.
There are so many things about that region that are coming out of our milieu, if you want to call it that. I know that Drew Graffia is working on something. You and I are writing a book that a lot of it's going to be explaining why that region, why Jesus taught there, what was it about that, how does that connect to Psalm 23, and many, many other things. But we also want to direct you, if you're interested in going to Israel with us, go to our website, gilberthouse.org, and you'll see a Travel With Us button at the top in the menu bar.
Yeah, click that, and that'll give you the information. Also give you an opportunity to look at some of the video that we shot on our previous 2 tours of Israel, our travelogue-umentaries, if you will. And you'll see then what you can see in Israel when you come with us. And, of course, from there you can get to the Lipkin Tours website and reserve your spot. So the itinerary is also linked from there. Gilberthouse.org. Look for the link in the menu bar that says Travel With Us.
So Scott Stripling?
Scott Stripling, recorded last year at the International Symposium of Archaeology and the Bible. Sharon and I are here, and you can tell we're in Albuquerque by the music behind us here. Joining us is a gentleman whose work we've followed for quite some time. He's the provost at the Bible Seminary in Katy, Texas, and the director of excavations at Shiloh in Israel, the place that we found most impactful on our tours. Dr. Scott Stripling. Scott, thank you very much for joining us here.
Thanks, Derek, for having me.
Shiloh is a place that many Christians really don't know much about because we're not taught much Old Testament in church anymore. Why is Shiloh important?
Well, it's interesting. Jesus probably was at Shiloh. It was occupied at the time. He passed right by, but it doesn't mention it. And so you're right, it's not that well known among Christians. But in Old Testament circles, you don't get any more important than Shiloh. It was Israel's first capital. This is where the Tabernacle was for over 3 centuries. This is where the Ark of the Covenant was, where people came to connect with God. For 300 years, when Jerusalem was still a pagan city, it was all about Shiloh.
So Shiloh, the tabernacle, was there almost as long as Solomon's temple lasted before Nebuchadnezzar put the torch to it.
Well, yeah, that's right. We're saying a little over 3 centuries at Shiloh before it's destroyed by the Philistines and taken into Philistine territory, goes to Katy and ultimately taken by David to Jerusalem.
Now, how long have you been working at Shiloh?
We started in 2017. We completed 3 seasons of excavation. Then the last 2 summers we have not been able to dig because of the worldwide pandemic. That did allow us to get caught up on publications and a lot of other things that we needed to do, but we're very eager to get back.
It's sort of like police work. It's the paperwork that's really
That's right.
the worst part of the job.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what have you discovered? What have you uncovered there at Shiloh?
Well, Shiloh is all about the sacrificial system. Was there a sacrificial system there, as the Bible says? And so as we excavate very systematically, going from the top down, like draining the water in a bathtub, and we're recording as we go, and the material's getting older the deeper that we go, we are uncovering evidence of a biblical sacrificial system, a bone deposit with bones only from the biblical sacrificial system, the preponderance of those bones being from the right side of the animal, a series of storage rooms that encircle the site full of storage jars, consistent with what you would expect, people coming to pay their tithe. No other site in Israel has that phenomenon. We have a monumental building from the period of the tabernacle that orients east-west and appears to be the exact dimensions of the tabernacle. And so this is something we're still excavating and still exploring. We have ceramic pomegranates, which is a motif of the tabernacle, and a demolished 4-horned altar. So you take all that together, a bone deposit, the storage rooms, the monumental building, the pomegranates, and the 4-horned altar. You've got a verisimilitude between what you read in the Bible and what we're finding in the material culture.
So I want to back up to the monumental building now.
Okay.
You found the orientation east-west and the dimensions match what's described in Scripture.
Yes, 26 by 52 meters, and that's what this is. And we have 2 places in the Mishnah, the 2nd century Mishnah, the Zebaim and the Seder Olam, that both mention that there was a stone foundation built for the tabernacle at Shiloh. So the tent was still open, but it sat on a permanent foundation. You get the same thing when you read 1 Samuel 3 in English, or even better in Hebrew. You'll notice a shift between a temporary language of, like, the curtains of the tabernacle are now referred to as the walls of the tabernacle. And so apparently something happened, and now this is where archaeology is so exciting, because archaeology doesn't change the Bible, it illuminates the text.
That, to me, is startling. I mean, we felt that when we were there, that this was just very powerfully and emotionally moving.
Yeah.
Especially because of the similarity of the site in general to Jerusalem, where the Temple Mount is not the highest peak in Jerusalem. The location of Shiloh is not the highest peak in the. What's the significance there? Why did God direct them to put it there on a lower point than the surrounding hills?
This is a good question. Most likely because there was already a settlement there. It was occupied by Canaanites. So when Joshua and the Israelites arrive around 1400, there is a massive fortification wall with a huge mud brick superstructure on top of it. And the people living there, these Amorites, have allied themselves. They're part of the Shechem city-state. So Shechem is about 20 miles further to the north. And remember Joshua 8, when the Israelites went there after their victory at Ai, they renewed covenant, and the Shechemites joined in with them. All Israel joined in together, alien and citizen alike. And so they had these deep roots back to the patriarchs. And so apparently they have embraced monotheism. My view is that Shiloh is part of that Shechem city-state alliance. And so why did they put it at that site? It was already a protected site. The building material was already there, close proximity to a spring. Joshua happened to be from the tribe of Ephraim also, and this is in Ephraim territory. So, and probably other reasons that we may never know, but that's some of what we know.
The thing that goes through my mind is that when you look at the mountains that were sacred to the pagan gods that were most familiar to ancient Israel, El of the Canaanites.
Sure.
His mount of assembly, according to Edward Lipinski, more than likely was Mount Hermon. We know that Jebel al-Akra, or ancient Mount Zephon in Turkey, was sacred to the god Baal, where his palace was located. Both of those are remote and very inaccessible. it appears to me as though Shiloh and then later the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Zion, were meant to be accessible by God to his people. That's a real change from what the pagan gods around Israel required of their followers.
Yeah, very much so. We're not trying to set up obstacles to keep you from approaching. I mean, there were ways that you did approach, but the idea was not to keep people away from their deity. Polytheism versus monotheism, accessibility versus inaccessibility, a universal deity as opposed to a regional deity. And so these are all interesting juxtapositions.
What more would you need to find to convince you that this monumental structure you've discovered at Shiloh was, in fact, the site?
Well, we need to excavate one more corner. And if this final corner is where I think it is, and then, of course, the wall that would connect to it, then I don't know what else it could be. I mean, I suppose you could have an ancillary building of the tabernacle that happens to be the identical dimensions, but the sort of the obvious conclusion is that you're literally dealing with the tabernacle platform. And where that gets really interesting is if this is indeed what we think it is, we are now working in the Holy of Holies. And, as a young man starting out in this field, wanting to have an impact, wanting to engage in the arena of ideas, I never thought I'd be excavating in the Holy of Holies, So this is really good stuff. Yeah.
Well, how does a Christian archaeologist get permission to excavate the site of one of the most holy locations in Israel's history, in Jewish history?
Yeah, well, I mean, just Shiloh itself was a big deal. It was sacred, and I was invited to do that. The work that we had done was excellent in our previous digs, and so it was by invitation from the Antiquities Authority and the local community, which is a rare thing. Usually you're approaching them and knocking on their door, but that's kind of what opened the door. But I didn't know that we would be excavating literally the place of the tabernacle at Shiloh. I mean, we decided on field H1, and my thought is that the tabernacle was probably on the summit of the site. But as we began to reveal this evidence that I'm talking about, it became clear that either blind luck or providentially, we were exactly where the sweet spot was.
Now, you mentioned the presence of a spring, and I just want to touch on that, and I think our next program I'd like to ask you a little bit more about that and how that relates to Jerusalem as well. How close was the site, the water course that they used at Shiloh?
It's about 1 kilometer away. It's called Ein Sailun, and you can easily visit it today. There's no buildings, there's no evidence of anyone ever living right adjacent to the spring there. So what they did is they hauled water all day. Every day somebody's making a trip back and forth. When it rains, they're able to fill their cisterns, but the rest of the time they're bringing water back and forth, including when they're operating the sacrificial system.
Right.
So if someone is of the mindset that you cannot have a sacrificial system without a spring in the temple precincts, that's just not correct. I mean, at Shiloh, it happened for over 3 centuries.
No, we'll talk more about that in our upcoming program here, but you found at Shiloh, you found a destruction layer that would correspond to the Philistine destruction of Shiloh?
That's right. We had gotten bits and pieces of it in some of our squares, but we got a sealed locus in 2019. And a sealed locus means that it's been undisturbed. It's a plastered floor, so we can be confident that underneath it the stratigraphy hasn't been damaged. So right underneath this floor was a heavy burn layer that, from the pottery and the carbon dating, dated exactly to the time of the Philistine destruction of Shiloh. Now this is very interesting because the Bible never comes right out and says that the Philistines destroyed Shiloh. It implies it. They had the victory at Aphek, at Ebenezer. They captured the ark. Psalm 78 suggests that maybe they destroyed Shiloh.
Right.
Jeremiah 7:12, go now to Shiloh and see what I did there. But it never comes out and says it. Here's where archaeology comes along and illuminates the text for us. Doesn't change it, it just sets it in a context.
And I guess that's a good question to follow up, or leads to a good question to follow up. Why should Christians care about digging in the Holy Land? And I know this is something you address in one of the videos that you produced for the dig. I mean, this seems like kind of an ancillary thing to what we are called to do with making disciples of all nations. How does archaeology help fulfill that mission?
Well, I think in many ways. Number one, we are removing obstacles that people have had that have been falsely put there. If they've been told that the Bible is not a reliable historical source, then they've got a proclivity away from faith. And some people just are not going to believe no matter what. Jesus said if one would rise from the dead, they wouldn't believe. But we do have about 1/3 of people in the middle that if we can address them in the arena of ideas with solid evidence, then they will consider that. And like at Mars Hill, I mean, they went away and they considered what he had said. And that's what we want to do. We want to engage in that arena of ideas. And on top of that, if you love the Bible, it's the ultimate opportunity to, it's like my own laboratory, really, to be able to understand the material culture of biblical times.
What was it like, one final question here, when you began recognizing the dimensions of that monumental structure?
I thought it was too good to be true. I kept trying to talk myself out of it. Surely it can't be. Because, when you come out and you say, we found this, immediately you're going to have people from the other side that are going, oh, there they go again. They're Stripling, he's an evangelical or whatever, And I just wanted to be careful. And but the further that we went, I just thought that the evidence was overwhelming.
I love the way he puts this, that his work and the work of other archaeologists in the field, it helps fulfill the mission of sharing the gospel.
Doesn't it, though?
Because some might look at this and say, well, why not just study
You're
Hebrew?
creaking.
It's this.
Oh, we bought these used.
Yeah, it's repurposed.
Yeah.
But it is a wonderful tool that can help counter the arguments of the skeptics saying the Bible is just a bunch of myths and fairy tales, but everything that they've been digging out of the ground supports the story and confirms that even though the Bible is not a history book primarily, the history that's in it is accurate, and that lends confirmation to everything else.
It is the history of his story.
Right.
From front to back. Every word matters. Every word matters. So we just love getting people excited about the Bible. It's why we write the books we do. It's why we do these programs. We want to remind you, by the way, that during the month of July, we still have the July special going on, which has been called the Roswell special. I think that's what it's called at our store. And we do that because we have been tracking Roswell, and no, we don't buy into what the government says, but we believe that it's significant. And so Derek and Josh Peck wrote a book called The Day the Earth Stands Still, and it's an important book. You can get that plus 2 DVD sets.
Yes, the best of SciFriday, volumes 1 and 2. Altogether, that is, that's a $65 value for just $35 plus shipping and handling?
I know, it's crazy.
But 75 years ago, this month, was when the modern UFO phenomenon kicked off with the crash outside Roswell, New Mexico. And that's why we're doing this special during the month of July. Know the truth, because the world would have us believe that our space brothers are our creators and they're coming back to help us upgrade to the next level, to level up.
No,
That's not the
Yeshua,
truth.
salvation comes only from the Son of God.
Amen to that. So take advantage of this. Share it with your curious friends, family members, colleagues. The truth is, in here, the Word of God. And we thank you for watching. This is SciFriday.
SciFriday is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries. Follow us online at scifriday.tv and gilberthouse.org. That's where you'll find our weekly Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship. We'd love to hear from you. Contact us through our websites or drop us a line at P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri 65633.